on here? I need the right audio.
Okay. All right, welcome back. We're going to talk about keyframes. How do I use keyframes? How does this stuff actually work? So we're going to manipulate the default cube here in Blender. And we're going to see how you can actually manipulate keyframes to animate it. How do you move stuff around inside of Blender and make it actually stick? Now keyframes, in the default view space that we have right here, you have this area down here where you have a basic keyframe editor. There's other ways that you can manipulate keyframes, and that is you can actually go and edit them with the graph editor instead. But this tutorial is just going to talk about the real basics of how do I move stuff around inside of this space. How do I move things like the default cube. If you wanted to put in and import your own model, you'd be able to do that. How do I move something like the lights or the camera? So those are the things that we're mainly going to manipulate here in this particular this tutorial. So let's start off with just the default cube here. First things first, how do I look through this camera? To look through the camera, you can press 0 on the keypad, and that will show you the camera's view. So once again, I'm pressing 0 on the keypad. If you have a laptop that doesn't have a number pad, you can go up here to File or Edit, and then Preferences, and then you can go into where it says Input, and you can click on the Emulate Numpad section here. And if you do that, then your 0 on your keyboard will emulate the 0 on the numpad, which will allow you to have that. So if it's not working for you, go into your preferences, go to Input, and then click on Emulate Numpad. Check this box right here, and that'll make it to where you can actually see it. Let me go into full view here. All right, so just keep that in mind. If you press 0, then you can go into seeing through your camera. Now, if you want to be able to move your camera somewhere, you can press N on the keyboard. If you press N, then you'll see over here on the top right, this menu will appear. And this will allow you to do a whole bunch of stuff in here. We're going to be using this menu quite a bit. So just remember, if you press N, it opens up this quick menu over here on the top right of Blender, which is really useful. Okay, so from here, if you go to View, go to the View tab, you're going to see something up here that says Camera to View. You're going to see that up here. You can also lock your camera to look at a specific object. So these are some things that, like you can have it locked to your 3D cursor, you can have it locked to a specific object in space, and you can also lock the camera to view. If you lock the camera to view, if you click on this check mark right here, then if I move around in the view space, you'll see that it moves my camera wherever I choose to have, wherever I'm moving. So this is really useful for being able to have my camera be pointed in the direction that I want it to go without just kind of moving my camera and hoping that it's looking at the object where I want it to be. So just keep in mind, using these options, pressing 0 to go into my camera's view. You can see here's my camera. If I press 0, I go into that camera's view. And then if I pressed N, I can see this quick menu up here. From there, I can click on this camera to view option under the View tab. And now if I move around in the space here, like pressing down my middle mouse button to be able to rotate around the object, using my mouse wheel to scroll in and out, or holding down Shift on the keyboard and then pressing down the middle mouse button to move where my camera is, I'm able basically to move this camera wherever I want it to be. You might want to do this to be able to set up your animation to where you have your framing to be where you want it to be. Like maybe I want to zoom in on a particular part of my cube or whatever my model is. So just keep in mind that camera movement, being able to move the camera around in space is going to be really helpful for your animation. So I'm just going to move my camera somewhere where I want it to look. I'm going to look at this cube from kind of like a little bit of an angle here. That's good right there. All right, so now that I know how to put my camera where I want it to be, let's talk about keyframes, about moving an object. So really there's just a few steps to being able to animate a basic object. So I'm going to click on this cube right here to say I'm specifying that this is what I want to animate, that I want to move. I'm going to press I on my keyboard to be able to say I want to insert a keyframe. Now what is a keyframe? We'll talk about that in just a moment more in depth. But basically we can say I want to do I want to animate a specific property of this this object that I have here. And in this case, we're going to animate the location and the rotation of this object. So I'm going to just press I, and I'm going to say location. There we go. Now what you're going to notice down here on the bottom left of our screen, you're going to see that on our this is our animation of our keyframes down here. Let me drag this up so you can see it easier. You can drag all these models or all these sections of Blender are modular, so you can kind of move them where you want. You can set up your own workspace. I'm just clicking right here on this line in between where our viewport is and this area down here, which is the keyframe editor. And you can see that since I clicked on this, there's a yellow diamond right here on keyframe 1. You can see there's a 1 right here, and now there's a yellow diamond right here. Now what I can do is I can click on this top area where this number is right here. I can click and drag in this area, and you can see that I can move that blue line, which we call the playhead, or the scrubber. There's different ways to refer to it. But basically, this is what frame of your animation we're in. And we think about what an animation is. It's a bunch of pictures, one right after the other. So this is picture 1 of my animation. This is picture 2. This is picture 3, and so on. As I move forward in time, these are all each individual images that the computer is going to try to create to give the illusion, kind of like a flip book, of motion of some kind. Now you can make your animation last however long you want. The default is 250, which is what you see over here in the top right over here of the keyframe editor. You're going to see something that says start and end. And you can edit how long your animation is by changing what the end is over here. So instead of making it 250, I'm going to make this 50 frames long. The animation should last 50 frames. All right, cool. Now you can see that after I've done that, you can see that my area here is now lasting 50 frames. You can see that it becomes dark gray after this point. That means that basically, hey, this animation is going to play up to 50 frames, and then it's going to cut out. It'll actually loop is what's going to happen. So what I can do now is I've set this keyframe. I said that I want this cube to be right here at this position, at this keyframe right here. Now if I go forward in time, let's say I go up to keyframe 25. Say that. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go all the way to my end. I'm going to go to keyframe 50 here. And I'm going to press I again. And I'm going to say I want the location or the position to be right here as well. And you can see here that now the keyframe has this line that is drawn in between. It's saying that we want to start at this position and we want to end at this position. And we can see that really I haven't moved the cube, so it's not going to move at all, right? Now what I could do is I could go over here to the middle, let's say position 25 or keyframe 25 of this animation, and I'm gonna move this object. So I'm gonna press G, and I'll say Z because I want it just to move up. You can specify. You can press G to be able to move it in any direction that you want, or if you press G and you press the direction that you want it to move in, like X, we'll move it in this X axis, the red line that's there. I can press GY to move it along the green axis here, or I can press GZ to move it up and down, which is what I want to do. I want to make it move up, and then I want to make it move down. It's going to be like a thwomp. I'm going to make it like a thwomp in Mario, where it's like a square that moves up and then it smashes you. That's basically that's what my demonstration is going to be here. So I'm going to move this up, and I'm going to click, and then I'm going to press I to say this is where, at this point in time, right here, frame 25, this is where I want this object to be. So I'm going to press I and press location. And now you can see that there is this keyframe right here where it starts at this position, if I go to the next keyframe, which is 25 here, you can see that the object is going to be up here in the air. And then if I go back to 50, you can see that it goes back down to where it started from. So let's see what this looks like. If I drag my playhead, my scrubber here, in between those 3 points, you're going to see that the computer is going to it's going to do all the motions, all the in-between frames, or we call them just tweens. It's going to take all the tween frames and it's going to figure out where it should be at that given point in time. Pretty cool. It does all the in-between work. We don't have to do the frame by frame animations. This is doing pose to pose animation, or it's just picking, this is where it should be at this moment in time. And then I specified where it should be at this moment in time. And then I specified where it should be in this moment in time. And it's going to take care of everything in between. Now what I can do is I can press play on the animation, this play button right here, and this will basically show me what it'll look like in real time. And you can see that I have basically this object is moving up and down. Huh, alright, cool. Now I do want to tell you one thing that is important, and that is there is something called interpolation. So let's talk about how we get to this. If I press the T key on the keyboard, when I have my mouse down here over my keyframe editor, let me pause this real quick. If I press the T key while I have my mouse over the keyframe editor, you're going to see this thing that says interpolation. And there's 3 things that I want you to see, and that's right over here. If you press the T key, you can choose to have constant interpolation, you can have linear interpolation, or you can have the Bezier interpolation. It's a French word, very nice French word, Bezier. And let's check out what the differences between these 3 things are. If I press play on my animation and I press T, the default, by the way, is Bezier. And Bezier is basically, when it gets to the top and the bottom of its animations, it's smooth. It slows down, and it kind of like acts in a realistic sense to where it eases in and eases out. But if I don't want that, I can press T, and I can change this to linear. Let's look at what linear looks like. So if I stop this, I want to have this interpolation to linear. Now when I press play, it's still doing that. Hold on a second here. There we go, linear. We're going to talk about interpolation more specifically when we get into using the graph editor. But you can basically make your, if I go in constant, you can see that it's just showing pose to pose where each frame would be. It does not fill out the stuff in between. You can see that it's just saying this is where it should be there, this is where it should be there. So this is a good way to check to see if things are where you want them to be. If I go back down here and I go to linear, you can see that now the motion, it does not ease at all. It just goes up and down, and it doesn't like slow down at all. It's linear in that the speed remains constant between these keyframes. It's very kind of robotic, and sometimes you want that. Like if I wanted this to emulate a machine of some kind, I probably don't want it to ease in and ease out. I want it to be very rigid in the way that it works. If I go back and press T and go to the Bezier interpolation, now you get that kind of smooth motion where it goes smoothly to each part and it kind of eases in and eases out. So this is important to know about. Once again, how do I access this? I just have my mouse over the keyframe editor here, press T, and you can change that. You'll also see that there's some strength changes that you can make. So if I wanted to change one of these, you can see, whoa, look at that. If I change it to exponential, look at how that affected the frames in between. It speeds up real fast. This is more of like what a thwomp is. It's going to swash. It's going to squash you down like that. So feel free to take a look, press T, and change these the strengths of your interpolation just to see what it looks like. These different types, they're going to have different feels to them. And feel free to try each one, right? These are things for you to kind of experiment with. We can talk about more specifically what they are Look at that. There's a bounce. There's a bounce dynamic effect. That's going to be helpful, right? Wow, look at that. So just by pressing T and going to your interpolation, you can see that there are, whoa, what is that? There's elastic effects. Interesting. There's back effects. Huh, all right. So that looks like it goes past the position, and then it kind of comes back a little bit. Interesting to see the different interpolation effects that we have for these keyframes. All right, I'm just going to set it back to Bezier. Bezier is the default, by the way, so just so you know, that's different ways that you can have your object interact with these keyframes. All right, now that we know how to do an interaction with the keyframe, let's do it with one more thing. Let's make it to where not only does my object change its position, but I also change its rotation. So I'm going to press I at this. I'm going to change to frame 1 once again. I'm going to go right here. I'm going to press I. I'm going to change the rotation. And I'm going to say that this is where I want the rotation to be. I want it to be perfectly flat. And then at the end over here, I also want it to be perfectly flat. So I'll press I again and say rotation. And now you can see over here that on my my interactions with the item, you can see that they turn gold. This is saying that I'm changing them in the keyframe editor. And there's also these little dots over here that let you change it. Let me show you that you can also record you can record things to where you don't have to place them in and type them in. You can just move stuff around inside of the keyframe editor to be able to change it. So let's say I go to my middle frame here, and let's say I want to flip it. Let's say I want this, when it's in motion, I want it to like rotate a little bit at this point when it gets up to the top of this this keyframe right here. So what you can do is, there's a record button right here on the animation keyframe right here. So I can press record right here. Boop. And now if I change anything in this, if I change anything, any parameter at all, it's going to set it to where this keyframe is going to have those changes affected to it. So let's say I want to rotate it. I can go over here up to the transform controls. If I press N, I can look over here and go to the items section, and I can go to rotation. And let's say I want to rotate it. I can click this and rotate it. Let's say I want to rotate it 45 degrees. I can click on here and say 45. And maybe I want to rotate it also in the X direction 45 degrees. There we go. I'm going to have it rotate like that 45 degrees in both of those directions. And now because I have the record mode activated down here, it's going to remember that I did that. So now if I go back, if I turn off record mode, now it knows that I want this set at that particular moment in time. Let's check it out. Look at that. Now when I go back to this point and I press play, look at that. It's rotating the object as well as moving it up and down. That was pretty easy. Now what's interesting about this is you could potentially just put in a keyframe with record mode. I could do something as crazy as I could go over here to like frame 12. And let's say I want to go in record mode and I want to spin it on Z a little bit. I'll say I want it to spin 45-degree angle on Z right there. And then right here I want it to go back to 0 degrees in Z. And then when I go back over here to this point of the keyframe editor, I can make Z back to 45. And then it's going to record each one of those points because I have record mode activated. So all I had to do was go to the keyframe that I wanted to, change a parameter, and then go to the next keyframe, change the parameter, and go to a next keyframe and change the parameter. And because I had record mode activated, I didn't have to like do anything else. I just had to say, at this point, I want it to be right here. At this point, I want it to be right here. And that's all you have to do. Now look at the animation that we have here. We have a slightly more complicated animation. Look at that. It's moving in the Z direction, back and forth. At each one of these points right here, it's showing you how it's moving. All right. Excellent. Let's say that this is good for my animation. I've got it where I want it to be. Maybe I want to change some other stuff. Like maybe you want to change where your light is in this area right here. So I'm going to grab my light right here, and I'm going to animate the light. So to do that, I'll press I. I'll change where its location is. And you can see down here on my keyframe editor, I have a new area here because when I click on this object, it has keyframes. When I click on this object, suddenly all those keyframes are gone because the keyframes are in this area set to basically the objects that you have selected. So I'm going to choose this object here. I'll say that at the beginning of the animation, I want it to be, let me move it in the Z, or move it in the X direction here. I'll have it right here. I'll press I, say this is where I want the location to be. At the end of the animation, or in the middle of the animation, I want to move it. So I'm going to say, I'm going to move it, and then I'm going to press G to move it in the X direction. And I'll just move it over here a little bit. And then I'll press I and say this is where I want the location to be at this moment in time, frame 25. Now I'm going to move forward back to frame 50. And you know what? I'm just going to copy. If you want to have it be in the exact same location as a previous frame, you can actually select the keyframe over here, right-click it and go to copy, and then go to where you want in time. And then you can right-click and go to paste, or press Control-C and Control-V. And that's going to put the light right back at the beginning where it should have started in the beginning. So now the light is also going to move back and forth. If I want to check out how this looks, I can go into my render view, or my shading view here, and when I press play, we can see that it's going to move not only where the cube is, but it's going to move where the light is to give the lighting a kind of different feel over here. Interesting. All right. So there's all kinds of interesting stuff you can do with this. You can play around with where the light is. You can play around with where the camera is. You can play around with where the object is. We don't have a whole lot of time left here. I would show you how to do the camera movement. I'll show you how to do the camera movement when we come back into class. Right now I just want to show you how we can record and render this out as an animation that we can actually save and we can watch. So let's check out how to do that. First thing that you want to do is over here on the right hand side in our panel over here, you want to click on the scene render, which is this thing that looks like the back of a camera over here. Now you want to choose your render engine. If you want it to be fast and easy, probably the best idea is for you to use Eevee. It's a really nice render engine. If you want it to have more realistic lighting and you have a stronger computer that you can use, you might want to use Cycles, because it'll come out, the lighting will be more photorealistic if you use Cycles. For this particular render, I'm going to use Eevee. So that's all I need to do for that. Now we're going to go to the next part down, the next menu option down here, which looks like a little printer. So we click on that and it says Output Properties on it. And from here we can change all kinds of things. We can change with the resolution of the output video that we create. We can change what the frame start and end would be. We can change its frame rate, so 24 frames a second. We can change this. If you want it to be smoother, you can make it 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second. This will change how long the animation is, though, so keep that in mind. I'm going to set it to 30 frames per second. Alright, my frame rate is 30 frames per second. I'm going to go over here to the output, and down here, this is where you can choose where your file is going to end up. So I'm going to click on this little file folder right here, and I'm going to change it to my videos folder. So I'm just clicking over here on videos, and you can make a folder if you want. In fact, I made a folder here called Blender. I'm going to put it in there. So I've got a videos folder, I've got something that says Blender, and I'm going to put it in there, just so I have a video folder that I can use. Now I also want to name this, so I'm going to call this Thwomp 1, because that's Thwomp 1 video, just so I have a name for it. Now I'm going to press accept, and now it has an output. This is what I'm going to save it as. Alright, cool. Now the next thing you want to do is right here where it says File Format. So we want to take a picture of it, so that would be the PNG, but we also want to make a video of it. So once you take a picture of it with the PNG, we also want to change this over here to be File Format. We want to go down to FFmpeg Video. There we go. And actually, let's see, there should be, let's see, AVI JPEG. There should be a MP4 option in here. Wonder where it is. Encoding. Ah, here we go. Alright. So we go to FFmpeg Video right here for file format. And then you want to click in the encoding tab down here, the encoding section, and change the container. Instead of Matroska, you want to change that to an MPEG 4, which is right here. This will make a video that we can turn it in. And that's mainly what I'm looking for. I want an MPEG 4 video. So, once again, You want to change your frame rate to 30 frames a second. You want to specify the output and the name of your video. Where's it going to save to? What's it going to be called? Change the file format to FFmpeg video. Then go into the encoding section and change the container to an MPEG-4. If you don't do this stuff, your video is going to be more difficult to watch and difficult to work with. So do all these things. Once you're done with that, down here you want to leave the codec at H.264. The output quality, if you want to, you can make this higher quality or lower quality. It'll just change the resolution, basically the compression rate of the object. I'm just going to keep it at medium quality. You know what? I'm going to go to high quality because I'm all about high quality stuff. Alright, so now that I've done that, how do I actually render this? Now we go up here to the top left where it says render. And I'm going to start by rendering an image. So there's my cube taken from the camera. And we're going to go to image and save as. And I'm going to save this as cube, or rather thwomp img 1. So it's an image. I'm going to save this also in my videos folder under Blender, just to keep it all in the same spot. I'm going to save that image. Now it's been saved. Cool. Now, I'm going to go back up to render and go to render animation. And this is going to take a little while, right? It's showing you from the camera's point of view what your animation is going to be doing. And now keep in mind, this is like your camera, your computer has to render every single individual picture, every frame of this keyframe right here. So as it does that, it has to go through and blah, blah, blah. It has to take a picture of every single one of these frames as it goes through. Now if I look at my videos folder, if I go to my videos folder, and I go into Blender, I now see that there is thwomp1 video, and it says how many frames there are. So it says frame 1 to frame 50. If I open this up, there we go, I can see it. There's the animation. Boop, 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 boop. Perfect. I made my first animation. Babby's first animation. I hope you have fun creating an animation that you enjoy. Play around a little bit with keyframes. Get stuff, you know, the whole way to learn this stuff is from experimentation. From getting in there and playing around a little bit, seeing what you can do, what you can't do. Hopefully this guide will help you with how keyframes operate in Blender, and hopefully you can have a little fun with it. Until next time, think for yourself and be that person that you wish you could be. It's not too late.